Today, I'm going to talk about finding a career.
Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher.
I was asked in the comments by viewer Whist if I had any advice for young men looking to find a career. So, here we go. So, the first thing in finding a career is that you need to consider the purpose of a career. And this relates to a sort of prevalent myth you see in American culture, and I think other cultures too, that your career is the same basic thing as a vocation. Like a person can have a vocation from the Latin vocare, to call, so a calling from God. So a vocation, in that sense, being a call to be a friar or a monk or a nun or sister, or to be a priest. That these things are callings where you hear the call and you respond to this call to go do this unusual thing. And now the thing is, in a sense, that isn't really any different than anything else that a person does. Everything that you do should be because it is why God made you. You should do it because God made you to do this thing. So a calling to the religious life of some kind is not really different in kind, in the sense that whatever you were supposed to do, God is calling you to do it. God made you for this purpose, and that purpose is other than just like sitting there not doing anything. So in that sense, everything you do of every kind should be a vocation. And in that sense, your career can be a vocation. But it's not really like the vocation to religious life. It doesn't. So if you become a monk, or a brother or a nun or a sister or a priest, there's a lot that you give up. There's a lot you live very differently, and this defines the totality of your day. Not quite the totality, but it defines an enormous portion of your day. If you look at how monks live, for example, where they have many times where they say prayers throughout the day, and so they do other things too, and they do work, and they do have time to be social and so on, but a very large fraction of their day is dictated by this becoming of a monk. And friars and stuff are similar, but there are differences. But it illustrates the point. I don't need to go into all the variations of it. How much this, to some degree, defines you. Not, again, in its totality, because really what defines you are the particulars, the specifics of every moment of your interactions with everything. Because we are all created for the particular. God is, God of the particular, of that which actually is, not of generalities, which is just a generality is, loosely speaking, our imagining of something. It's not to say that generalities aren't real. I'm not being a nominalist here, but their generalities don't have the same sort of reality as particulars, and we, especially as spirit and matter together, we live here in this temporary life for the particulars. That's the work we've been given to do, as particular work. And so there's a very useful sense in which we can say that to have that sort of vocation really defines your life, and in a large sense, like the purpose of your life. There are multiple purposes to life, obviously, and one of them is to enjoy the goodness of God, even in this temporary life. But one of them is to take part in the creation of creation, through delegated, secondary causation, technical term delegation, what I prefer to call it. So your career will only be a small part, really, of how you do it. I mean, it takes up a bunch of time during your day, but if you're not in religious life, it's really not the same sort of thing. It's not, most or a large fraction of your life is going to be lived very much outside of your work and having no reference to it. This is the thing. If a monk, if a friar goes somewhere, he goes somewhere as a friar. He's doing things as a friar. If you are a professional lumberjack and you go to a conference on whatever stamps, you're not going as a lumberjack. You're going as yourself. You just happen to be a lumberjack during work days. That's a key distinction that you need to draw. This idea that like your career is going to define you is not true. It's not the way it works. Your career is there really to provide for the rest of your life. And it should be good work. We'll get to that. but it exists simply to provide for other things, to provide for yourself to live and do other things, to provide for others to live, whether that be family or whether that be the poor or whomever. You probably will be given to produce more than you need and therefore can support others through that labor. And so, most people are, not everyone. And so that's why you're doing the labor. It's for the sake of that. Now, you want it to be good labor. And as I said, I'll get to that. But it's really that. It's something that you can do that will support the rest of your life. And that's the key thing. Now, there's a related idea to that whole, like, your career is your vocation thing. And that is, you might have heard that phrase, like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. The idea being it'll never feel like work. It'll always just be like nothing but, wonderful play all the time for which you happen to get paid. And, there are probably a few people in the world who have somehow managed to, who have lucked out to really, truly, tremendously enjoy something that a sufficiently small number of people can do and or enjoy such that people actually do get paid to do this thing, where they just love it and it's great and it's just play year after year after year, day after day after day throughout the years. It's just always so much fun, and you do it if you were rich and could do whatever you wanted. You would do this anyway. There's probably a few people who are in that position. I mean, I would not say that there are none. That applies to, statistically speaking, nobody, though. It's not realistic, and by and large, everybody's experience is when you try to do something that you love professionally, it becomes work. You still enjoy it much of the time, and some of the time you don't enjoy it, because one of the things about work is you have to do it even if you don't feel like doing it. And there's some exceptions, there's such thing as sick days and vacation and what have you. But by and large, most days of the year, you have to do your work even if you don't feel like it. Even if you're in a completely different mood, even if you're just not feeling it, you still have to do it. And to some degree, that's what separates the professional from the amateur. The amateur gets to decide, because they can both be highly skilled, the amateur gets to decide, I don't feel like doing it now. The professional has to do it. And so we come to the question, all right, of how do you pick a career? So bearing in mind that the purpose of a career is to provide you with the resources necessary in order to do the rest of your life, and to provide potentially for other people, possibly a family, possibly, especially children, potentially aged parents, possibly the poor, if not a family, or maybe both. You never know. There are a lot of people for whom you can provide for in this world, and to whom it may be given to you to provide for. So you want to pick a career that will give you the ability to provide for a lot of people. If it's, see, the thing is, you want to prepare in case it is given to you to provide for a lot of people. And if you can provide for a lot of people, it probably will be given to you to provide for them. So, you want to look at your abilities and skills and the things that you can learn, because when you're picking a career, you still have most of your learning ahead of you. And to think about, like, what things does it seem like I could do and what skills could I develop that are of great value to others, such that I would be paid a lot for them. You don't want to, and now that's the first question. You want to balance this out with, also, what could I do day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out, and not hate? And find this a tolerable way to earn my living. Possibly even enjoyable some of the time. Most work will be enjoyable at least some of the time. There'll be some benefits to most kinds of work. I mean, though the work does not particularly appeal to me, I remember talking to somebody who spent years working as a garbage man and talked about how much he really enjoyed it. And he was the guy who rode on the back of the truck and would get off. This is before they were automated, or had the big claw thing that would pick them up. But he's one of the guys who would ride on the back and he'd get off and grab trash cans and dump stuff in and get back up on the truck, and then it would move and then go and dump it in and so on. And he really liked it. And, good for him, for one thing. And, and there's another, I think it's a good illustration of where what you will find tolerable, what people find tolerable varies from person to person. And also, most things will have something that, some good in it you can find. So you want to figure out something that you think would be reasonably well paid, not just now, but in the foreseeable future. So there periodically come up fads, for lack of a better term. Things like I remember when I was a kid, basically like when I was a very young child. There was the introduction of VHS cassettes. For the first time, there was home recording, and people could rent VHS cassettes and watch movies whenever they wanted to. I was too young to really remember this. I'm a little bit older. I remember the stories of how a few years ago this started and how, but I was just old enough to remember the giant boom in video cassette stores. Rental places, rather. They're just all over the place because there was this enormous unmet demand. And so people were making tons of money because so many people had all these movies they wanted to see and never got a chance to see. And they're really expensive to buy on VHS, but you could rent them for only a few dollars. And so they're a huge boom. But I mean, looking at it, what are the odds in 30 years the technology will stay the same, that there won't be improvements, that you will still have this, that there won't be consolidation within the industry making these little video rental places much less profitable? General rule of thumb, don't bet heavily on technology that is radically new staying the same. So, and then there are other cultural fads. A bunch of years back, there was a fad for nail salons. And they opened up all over the place. And there's huge unmet demand. And it was really popular for a while. And then the popularity of having your nails done in fancy, expensive ways that you pay people a lot of money for waned quite considerably. And again, this is one of those things that's like in fashion, like whether or not you pay a lot of money to have your nails done, primarily women, is very much a thing that can come and go, as distinct from things like feeding people or clothing or building roads or any number of other things where in the foreseeable future, this looks like there will still be a demand for this, and that demand will probably look something vaguely like what it does now. Everything needs adaptation. No matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, you will need to adapt over time. It's not a question of will it stay the same. It's a question of like, can I reasonably say, this doesn't look like something that's going to so radically change, it's impossible to guess what it'll even look like, or this will probably go bust in a few years. Don't pick one of those. That's basically it. Like, look at, because no one can foresee the future, but look at it and say, like, if I'm going to be shocked that this job still exists in 10 years, don't pick that as a career. Probably current thing, maybe at the time I'm recording this video, it might be slightly late. The big boom in cryptocurrencies, it may still be going on of people investing and thinking, ooh, I want to be a cryptocurrency investor. Burgeoning new technology, what are the odds that you'll still be doing anything vaguely like this where the same or related skill sets may possibly apply in 30 years? I would be real hesitant to pick something like that as a career because there's such an excellent chance of any career vaguely like it at the moment going bust, and completely different skill sets with very different people being the people who actually will succeed as the thing stabilizes out once it's been around for a while. Okay, that said, you can make too much of that because the world changes and you adapt and you build up enough skills that you can transition from one thing to another periodically. So, don't get hung up about that. Just try to avoid things that look like they're probably a bad idea and probably won't be around for all that long, or will probably have radical changes to them such that whatever you're setting yourself up for probably won't, has a very good chance of, not working even like in a few years. Okay, so there's that. Now, advice that I've sometimes given to people in terms of, and this relates to the not hating it part. It needs to be something in which you can see the good of the job reasonably well. I'm assuming, by the way, that it goes, I kind of figured it goes without saying that the work should be moral. Whatever you pick should be something that you can do with a completely clear conscience. Most jobs you can do with a completely clear conscience. The number of jobs that are morally iffy are not that huge, so just avoid those. If that didn't go without saying, make sure that like the job and what it looks like it will turn into over time are all things that would be morally upright to do. I don't think that needs to be belabored. Okay, the other thing, so about a job that you won't hate. a job that you'll find tolerable to do, or and enjoy parts of. So you want to find something in which you can see some of the good, or much of the good, in what you will be doing in this job. It doesn't need to thrill you, because if it does thrill you, it'll stop thrilling you once you get used to it. Again, there are going to be a few exceptions to this stuff. I'm going to just state it in sort of general. I'm going to state the statistical norms without qualifying them all the time, because it's kind of annoying to qualify them all the time, mostly to listen to that. But yeah, I mean, all the things that I state as absolutes, they will admit of exceptions. There will be people who will be exceptions to this. It's rarely a good idea to bet that you'll be an exception, by the way, when planning things out. If you know that you are, okay, well, God bless you. But if you know that, you're probably not watching this video. Okay, so the thing about having a reasonably decent time, there are two important things to bear in mind about this. One, you will fall out of love in the sense of you will not have a rush of enthusiasm about anything for decades. Anything that human beings enjoy, we settle to a quieter version of enjoyment, a less exciting version of enjoyment over time. Second and concomitant thing is that which you are exposed to, if you are trying to see the good in it, you become better at appreciating. So now that if is very important. You have to be actively trying to enjoy the thing. You have to be trying to see the good and trying to appreciate it. But if you put effort into that, the things that you are exposed to frequently, you will get better at the skill of seeing the good in them and enjoying them more. So, what I tend to recommend to people is, like, pick your second or third favorite thing to do. So if you haven't actually worked yet, and you have various hobbies and so on, don't try to make your favorite hobby your job. Pick like your second or third favorite hobby, if it's the sort of thing that can be turned into a job, and do that instead. And the reason why is because all work is done for money. It's what makes it work in this sense of the word. You are employed. All employment is done for money, definitionally. The reason people are giving you money is because they want the task done, and they want the task done the way they want it done. That's why they're giving you the money, because they want a result, and you can provide that result, and so they're giving you money in exchange for the result. Really straightforward, but the consequence of this is you have to do it the way they want, not the way you want. There will be compromise, and all human beings compromise, and you can persuade people like, hey, you're paying me, you said you want it this way, but it would actually be better this way, don't you think? And sometimes people will say yes, and sometimes people will say no. And if they say no, then you have to do it the way they want in order to get paid. That sort of compromise can be very painful on the thing you love most in the world. So, for example, suppose you love philosophy. Suppose that reading philosophy is one of your greatest passions, or is your greatest passion in life. And I'm merging theology and philosophy in here together. I do not recommend, then, trying to become a philosophy professor or otherwise making your living off of philosophy, because the reason being, you will have to do this in a way that is acceptable to the people who are paying you. And this is the thing you love most in the world, so that those compromises will be very painful to you. If you pick your second or third favorite thing, like say your greatest passion in life is philosophy, but you also really enjoy woodwork, well, maybe be a carpenter. And when you have to make, cabinets, for example, so say you're doing cabinets, or you're a carpenter in a house or what have you, you make fancy tables for people, whatever exactly it is. When they want something that you don't think is a great idea, but they're paying you, so you make it the way they want it, like the table's too long for its width or too wide, and it'll be hard to reach the middle. Okay, you know what, it kind of sucks that you're making a table that's overly wide here, and people won't be able to use it that well, but they're paying you, you get the table done, you enjoy, the particulars of it rather than the entire thing. Kind of sucks that the table looks stupid when you're done, but you ship it off, you get paid, and then you go do your favorite thing and forget all about it, because now you're just doing your favorite thing. Like, you sit down and pull out, whichever book of, pull out, Plato or Aristotle or G.K. Chesterton or whomever you want to read, and you forget all about it because now you're doing your favorite thing in the world. And you're doing it exactly the way you want. You only have to read the good philosophers. You don't have to read terrible philosophers. which you probably have to do if you're paid for it, and you get to really, truly, thoroughly enjoy that. And so you will have a much happier life. In this, you'll find it much more tolerable over the years to deal with the inevitable compromises that arise um, in in whatever your work is over the years and decades, than if you're doing your favorite thing. Because you'll always have something better to go to solace yourself when you have to deal with the downsides of a fallen world in which you are compromising for money. So, and it's fun if your second, third favorite thing. As I said, people, if you are trying to learn to enjoy it, you will get better at enjoying the thing over time as you do the thing. So even as you're doing it for money, and there'll always be stresses and there'll always be parts of that suck, you will get better at enjoying it and appreciating it. Not that it'll become your favorite thing, but over the years, this will help you to find the thing a tolerable way to earn your living. So, past that, it's largely a question of figure out what your aptitudes are. So in terms of getting slightly generalities about how to get into the specifics, figure out what your aptitudes are. Figure out what you're good at, whether, if you're good at communicating with people, that's a very useful skill. If you are good at, precise movements, if you're good at detail oriented, if you're good at planning, there are many, many skills that are involved. And most jobs that pay halfway decently require you to be good at least several skills. Because most skills tend to be normally distributed with a bell curve. And most jobs require, I think this is going to be the low end for you, left to right, usually, and getting bigger. So if that's the bell curve, most jobs require you to be about, somewhere from average to one standard deviation above the mean on 2 or 3 kinds of aptitude. Whether, you're excellent at it or merely better than about 60% of the 70% of the population, it varies with the job. Most of the time, a job will have one thing it'll be really helpful if you're pretty good at, and then several things that it is, good for you to be at least average or a bit better than average, but not necessarily wildly better than average. Top 40% of the population in some of the sub skills is often all that you need. So figure out kind of where you are. Think about what sort of things you may have, found interesting, and try to figure out where do your aptitudes, the things that you're good at or could become good at, start trying. Don't just assume I can become good at something, but start trying to become good at the thing and see if it you actually progress and how painful it is to progress in that way. And then kind of try to match those aptitudes up. Then keep your eyes open for what things the skills that you pick up and things that you may be able to transition them into, where you will pick up skills along the way, and maybe that will, work into other things that you might be able to provide even more value at, and therefore be able to be paid more for. When I say provide value, I mean provide economic value, not moral value. Just want to be clear. Some people confuse the two of them. Economic value is a subset of moral value, really filtered through the fact that people are not always very good at estimating moral value. So, for example, food is good for somebody who's hungry and therefore has moral value. So if you provide food to people, you are providing something of moral value. But because we are not trying to run each other's lives, we simplify this and abstract this into essentially how much are you willing to pay for this as a measure of how valuable is this thing to you, and that is economic value. There's all sorts of uncertainties and errors that get built into it, but it's a fallen world and people are wrong about an incredibly large amount of things, have been since the fall of man, will be until the end of time, when the Son of Man comes again in glory, and the world ends, and then finally, etc. So, so when I say provide greater value, I mean greater economic value, more of what people believe is of value to them, to the point that they are willing to pay money in order to obtain it. They may be wrong, they may be mistaken, they may be fools, but we have to essentially live our economic lives on trust that other people are running their lives at least halfway decently, and that they're not running their life substantially worse than you would, given that you're not even them and don't have time to run it. And so, given that level of trust in the in other people, what they're willing to pay you is as about as much, again with exceptions, but it's about as far as you can go in measuring how much value you're actually providing to people. And you know for sure that it's not going to be accurate. God will know more accurately than the price people are willing to pay you for things. But yeah, that's about as far as you can go. And so that's kind of how to find a career, how to figure out how to do it decently, and remembering that these are basically all the compromising techniques for how to do it well, remembering that it's there in order to enable, primarily there to enable other things, to keep you alive, and well fed and clothed and housed, and to take care of others too. And, well, I hope that's of some help. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at. If you like this video, then clicking the like button, according to YouTube, will make them more likely to recommend it to others. If you know anyone who might get something out of this video, then it would be kind to share it with them, or just share it on social media in general. And if you'd like to see future videos of mine, you can subscribe. And if you're not in the habit of checking your subscriptions page regularly, then I suggest clicking the notification bell and setting that to always, because otherwise subscribing to a channel basically just sort of like gives YouTube a hint that maybe it should consider recommending these videos to you, possibly at some point, if they think so. It's a funny world we live in. God bless.